Yeah, somebody's already come up with that idea.
Well, I guess we can go ahead and get started. My name is Stacey Cochran. If you haven't met me before, I organize the Wilmington Right to Publish group. I want to thank you all for coming today. We're going to have a really interesting discussion. At least I think this will be fascinating. I've never led a discussion on Podiobooks before. It's such a new medium. So it'll be neat to see how this unfolds, and I can't wait to hear some of your questions about this. But to begin with, you know, I've got this outline here saying, well, what is a Podiobook? A Podiobook is essentially, it's kind of like an audiobook serialized online. If you think back to the way that novels were published, you know, 80 years ago or 180 years ago, say in Dickens' time, they would serialize their books in magazines. Well, Podiobooks is doing a similar kind of thing to perhaps the way that the radio shows of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s were broadcast via radio, where a novelist can upload episodes of their books serialized, and they're released every week or every month or whatever frequency the author would like. And then the audience subscribes to the feed, basically an RSS feed for a book. So whenever a new episode is uploaded, the audience gets a notification, or if they're using iTunes or something like that, then the book is automatically put into their iTunes folder. Does that make sense? Basically, it's a serialized audiobook online.
Just want to look more about that history. You were saying it's kind of like they used to do this on radio, is that what you're saying? What was the idea that the guy was going to create an entire book, but then like chapter by chapter, was that the idea? And then release it as an entire book, or no?
I think, well, what I'm thinking of specifically are sort of the radio dramas, and I've only heard of these in sort of retrospect. Obviously, I wasn't alive in the 30s and 40s. But the way that they would have sort of the cliffhanger ending at the end of each episode, and they would use, you know, bells and whistles to sort of accent the drama, and but it was all audio. This was, you know,
it was all audio, so it wasn't, the purpose was not to release something in print as an end goal.
Maybe in the history of that, but I don't know exactly what they would do with the audio dramas on radio. What's interesting about this in relation to that question, though, is a lot of these authors are releasing their books in print while doing these audio books online, these Podiobooks. So like it says here, you know, a Podiobook is a serialized audiobook which is made available in podcast format. How many folks are familiar with the word podcast? How many people have actually listened to a podcast?
I've seen it.
A few people. Basically, a podcast is, again, it's kind of like a radio show that people can, that anybody here could do at home from their computer and release sort of a radio show via the internet. And there are all kinds of podcasts. There are podcasts for automotive repair. There are podcasts for movie critics. There are podcasts for novels. There's podcasts for music. You can imagine, if you can think of anything that could be talked about, people are probably producing some sort of radio podcast of it. And basically it's a show. You could have your own podcast show, you know, every week and have develop listeners and that kind of thing. Well, the neat thing about Podiobooks is that they already have an established audience of about 50,000 members. They've been around for about 3 or 4 years, and so they've developed a listenership, if you will. Some of the things that it says here, you know, some listeners keep it on their computers. So if you're at home and you get onto the internet, which is what we've got here, this is just an internet browser here, and then this is the homepage for Podiobooks.com. From here, I know you probably can't see it terribly well, but from here you could, let's see if I can find the Colorado sequence on here. They have about 200 book titles right now, a little over 200 book titles on Podiobooks. So here's the homepage for the Colorado sequence. But again, this is just an internet connection that we're using here, just like any that you would have at home. There's a sample first chapter that folks can listen to very easily if this works.
They're all audio, they're not just print.
They're audio.
The following is a Podiobooks.com presentation.
I'll play about 90 seconds of this.
Hey folks, this is Stacey Cochran, author of the Colorado Sequence. Thanks so much for checking out my audiobook here at Podiobooks.com. This audiobook presentation is narrated by Owen Daly. The print copy of the Colorado Sequence is copyrighted 2007, and this audiobook presentation is copyrighted 2008. Print copies of the Colorado Sequence are available through online retailers like Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble Online. To find out more about me or about the Colorado Sequence, please do visit my website, staceycochran.com.
Most of the authors do like a 60-second intro of each episode.
StaceyCochran.com. Thanks so much for listening to this introduction. And now, the Colorado Sequence, read by Owen Daly.
What terror lurks in hearts of
I'm really happy with all myself for that.
Chapter 1, The Caribbean Island. Dr. Amy Levine's interview with the U.S. government took place 90 miles east of Miami, Florida. Man-o-War Cay, Great Abaco Island.
So there you
The
go.
island
You
was
just
privately owned by a firm
each episode is about 30 minutes long, although as an author,
no nanotech employee had ever set.
as an author, you can select how long you want to do it. Basically, it's kind of a self-publishing tool. Although these folks at Podiobooks do vet the work to some degree, so they're acting kind of as editors. What's really fascinating about this is there's never been a publishing venue like this. This medium hasn't existed before, so they're kind of rewriting what we think of as getting published. Do you have any questions?
I do have a question. First of all, how do you get somebody to read your book? Do they pick the person, or do you pick the person?
That's a great question. The actor that I'm working with here, Owen Daly, I met. He lives up in Raleigh. His wife, in fact, had worked on the TV show to some degree that I'd done, and he's sort of an aspiring actor, and he was interested in this, and they kept asking me about it. They said we should do one of these things. So in that case, this was an actor that I knew personally, had met, and we ended up collaborating together on this. They do have actors that you can use, but it costs money through the website. Also, as you can see down here at the very bottom of this page, I've actually been wondering if anybody would be interested in doing this. And because I have a certain skill set in putting this together, I said, well, I'll just put this out there. If people are interested in it, I'll do a full production for you for your book at $150 per 5,000 words, which is probably about, you could shop online and see what they're doing there as well. But what I would encourage you to do, you could do this all yourself. You don't have to use somebody else's services. But I'll just toss that out there if you're interested. So what do you need exactly to create one of these audiobooks? Like I say, I think everybody in here could do this. It's not really rocket science. Basically 4 things. You need a computer. You need some sort of audio editing software. You need a microphone that plugs into your computer, and then an internet connection. Those 4 things: a computer, some sort of audio editing software where you can record your voice reading. Then you need an internet connection, and you need a microphone to be able to actually do the recording. And so what I thought I would do here is kind of do a basic demonstration of how to actually do some recording using some audio editing software.
Do you suggest any type, any audio editing software? I mean, is there, I guess there are many types?
Yes, I recommend this Audacity is the name of it, in all caps in the middle of the page.
Oh, that's the name of the software?
That's the software program,
Okay.
Audacity.
Is that freeware or?
It's free. You can download it from the internet for free.
Just Audacity.com or something?
If you Google search Audacity, it'll bring up the download page.
And what file format are you saving in and uploading?
That's a great question. For me, it's a little bit complicated because I'm working with an actor who's sending me CDs of his sort of raw reading. What ends up going up to Podiobooks is the MP3 files.
MP3, okay. Is that the only file they accept?
Yes.
MP3.
Sure.
Let's say that we would download this Audacity.
Mhm.
I mean, and let's say we decide to read can we read our own?
Absolutely.
But you said an MP3 format. I mean, does this Audacity have that format? Is there anything
Yes.
else has to be done to do it?
No.
Okay.
Depending on your computer.
I have an XP, Windows XP.
That
Is that what you mean?
That should be okay. Yeah, you should be able to.
Let me show you, let me do a real quick demonstration of Audacity. This is pretty simple. But this here is, this is an Audacity template, if you will. I don't know how well you can see this, but up here there are little buttons that you can click on. The red one's the record, the green arrow is the play, there's a pause and stop, just like a tape deck, if you will. Now this is hooked up to this microphone over here, which is connected by a USB cable. Just one simple cable. It plugs straight into the side of the computer through a USB port. Most computers have a USB port. That microphone retails for about 80 bucks.
Would you need a microphone like that powerful? I have one of those little tiny little ones that I can.
And honestly, you could use, like this computer has an internal mic actually in the computer itself that I could record with. And a lot of computers, if you've bought a computer in the past year or so, they have an internal mic on the computers.
Okay.
Now the quality is going to be maybe not quite as good as, you know, an $80 studio condenser mic, but sure, you could, whatever you can use to record with, if you can get it into a digital format, which is what Audacity does. If you're a Mac user, Macs have a GarageBand, which is another type of audio recording and editing software program, and there are others out there. Your computer may already have something like Audacity on it where you can record audio, so you might check whenever you get home if you're not already aware of that. Yes.
Stacey, does Audacity have a audio file of like the sound effects and so forth? Because, you know, obviously the soundtrack with something like this is going to create the ambiance and everything else, you know, you can think of. Or is that something that you kind of mix in?
Everybody understand the question? So like the music that was in the background, adding suspense and everything. No, Audacity doesn't have that.
Okay.
It's only one channel, is that what you're saying? Audacity can only
No,
receive
Audacity, you could put up to 20 lines of audio.
Oh, you can, so it has a mixer. It takes in more than one channel.
Let me show you real quick. So we've got this thing hooked up with the mic here. We'll just do check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So we've got a piece of audio there. You can see the waves kind of spring up here. Then we can play it back. Here. Let's do check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So we've got a piece of audio. Now there are some effects that you can do, things like compressing the sound to make it a little bit better quality, adding bass, amplifying, those kinds of things Audacity does have. But let's say we wanted to do, imagine that this clapping was thunder. It creates this other track here. So for the music, essentially what I would do is I'd have 2 tracks. I don't want to get too technical here, but we'll play this. Check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So you can imagine if this was a music track there, it would be playing the music at the same time that the audio that was recorded was doing its thing as well.
And then you can adjust the volume for each track individually, things like that. Okay, so it really has a mixer, and that's what it has.
So that's Audacity. Again, the 4 things you would need to have a Podiobook, essentially a computer, some sort of audio editing software program like Audacity, a microphone that plugs into the computer, and then an internet connection. Ultimately, you're going to have to be able to get the files then onto Podiobooks, so the internet connection would be the way to do that. And then we did the demonstration of the Colorado sequences, as you can see. So yeah, are there any questions about?
So is it capable of providing subtitles for people who are hard of hearing or something like that?
No, not that I'm aware of. That's an interesting question. Yes, go ahead.
You see there are like 52,000 members that tune into this. Is there a menu for them to select whether it's for young adult or mystery or?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yes. let's see, just sort of quickly scroll through like the home page here. So clicking on the home page, they have a drop-down menu here, the very first one, and that is alternative history. Others are business, children, erotica, Jackie. There you go, some erotica there. Essays, fantasy, fiction, historical fiction, history, horror, dark fantasy, humor, magical realism. So they have all these different genres as well.
And would we know how many hits people know when they have a website? They have how many hits or something?
Yes.
Does that come up?
Excellent questions. I could show you like how many downloads that I've had of this. There's 2 or 3 different categories. I first started publishing this in May. So there's a number of different analytics, if you will, for measuring the kind of response that I've gotten to it. The one that matters, well, I think the one that kind of matters to Podiobooks, they rank it on this basis, is the number of subscribers that you have. Now they have an entire ranking system too, so I'm clicking on check out the charts. And the Colorado sequence is currently ranked 9th for the most subscriptions in the past 30 days.
Oh, that's good.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so we're doing pretty well. When we first started, it was ranked even higher because you get most of your subscribers right at the beginning. After a couple of months, it begins to trickle to where you're getting 5 to 10 subscribers per day. All total, since putting this online in May, I've gotten just over 500 subscribers. That equates to, at this point, over 5,000 downloads of all of these episodes that have gone online.
Do you get any money out of it?
Good question. Right now, it's a perfectly natural question to ask too. Right now, the folks who are running Podiobooks are doing this on a donation basis, which is not making a lot of money. I don't think I've gotten a single donation yet. Speaking of donations, I have a tip jar up here. If you guys want to put in a little bit of money for gas to get down here from Raleigh today, whenever you leave, feel free to do that.
Could you whet somebody's appetite, really read, and say, oh, now if you want to know what happened, go buy my book?
That's an excellent question. What happens, and this has happened, because they're released episodically, think about it for a minute. There are basically going to be about 40 episodes of the Colorado sequence. That's 40 weeks that it'll take to get the whole book online. What happens are people get hooked into the story and say, well, I don't want to wait until December for the rest of this book to be released. I'll go ahead and buy the book.
So that's your payback.
And it's fascinating, several of the more successful authors who have used Podiobooks have gotten, a handful of them, have gotten major publishing contracts as a result of building a readership using Podiobooks. One of the most successful guys is a fellow named Scott Sigler, who publishes sort of dark horror science fiction, sort of in the Stephen King tradition. And you know, he was up to having 30,000 subscribers with his book. That's a lot of capital of people who are invested in his work and are interested in it, so that what he was able to do was take that subscription base, if you will, and use it to get a publisher for his work, that then whenever the book was published with Crown earlier this year in print, it vaulted up to like number 10 on Amazon for the first month that it was published.
That was Infected, wasn't it?
I think so. He published several of those.
Yeah, because I bought Infected.
It's pretty dark stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Stacey, who does the marketing for this now? Does Podiobooks do the marketing, or do you do it yourself? Second part of that question is, you could really do the same thing on your own website, right? If you had the podcast, you can just drive people to that.
Sure.
Okay, so it's not...
The thing that Podiobooks provides is they provide an established audience. These guys have been on NPR. They've built this 50,000 member community so that if you release a Podiobook, if it's any good, if the quality is pretty good, you're going to get 100 or 200 subscribers just out of the gates. If it's really good and it begins to catch on and people are writing reviews of it and saying, hey, I love this, and there's a little bit of word of mouth, you could get upwards of 1,000 or 2,000 subscribers by the time a book is done.
And you get some reviews back then, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I've gotten 3 reviews from total strangers for
That's
the
worthwhile too. Oh, that's nice.
for
Yeah.
the Colorado sequence here in just the past, couple of weeks. One person says, I've reached chapter 3 of the book and I'm loving it so far. My 2 previous experiences here on Podiobooks were Earthcore and Ancestor by Scott Sigler. I came back looking for something entertaining, well-written, and plotted with a quality presentation, and so far I've not been disappointed. Keep up the great work. So you get feedback like that, and once you get enough people chatting about it, and some folks actually putting links to the books on their blogs and what have you, it creates word of mouth.
Well, for instance, on your introduction where you're StaceyCochran.com, can you give one of the reviews and say,
Sure.
Well,
Tim from Wilmington says.
Right. Well, on the opening page here, there's a bunch of words that I actually got for the print version of the book. Now, see, what I did, this was sort of my own personal strategy with this. I published it in print first and sold as many copies as I could as a self-published author for about a year, which amounted to about 200 or 300 copies. Not a whole lot, but, that was getting the book out there and selling it. Once those sales began to kind of trickle, then I said, well, what I should do is put it online as a Podiobook. Once it's only selling a couple of copies per month, see if there's any life. And what it's done is it's kind of re-injected life into this book. And it's a fun thing to collaborate with this actor. We'll probably be doing this, like I said, through December of this year.
Are you going to do the whole book?
The whole book, yeah. And I've had a couple of these folks, just a handful of them, who have sent me emails through the website saying, I can't wait for the end of the book, I'm going to go ahead and buy a copy of it. And if your book's really, really successful, then, it could potentially open up the doors to a publisher. Like I say, if you've got, 10,000 subscribers, that's a bunch of people who are interested in your work, who then would buy a book if it was published with, a Crown or a Random House or...
Have you thought of a sequel or something?
Well, it's interesting. I've got another book, the Claws book, which you guys have heard me talk about. Some of you have heard me talk about here before, which is a suspense novel, sort of a mountain lion version of Jaws. And I'm thinking that'll be the next book that I'll do. Although I just got a nibble from a publisher on that this past week, so we'll see how that goes.
Stacey, if you've
Yes, ma'am.
never published in print first, does Podiobooks offer you copyright help or anything like that?
That's a great question. So the question about copyright with this, you may want to write this down if you're taking notes. Their books are released through a type of copyright known as a Creative Commons license.
Creative what?
Creative Commons,
Okay.
C-O-M-M-O-N-S, Creative Commons
And what is that?
license. Now, I'm not an attorney, but basically what a Creative Commons license does is it enables viewers to listen to your audio book, but not to copy it on their own and make a profit off of it. It protects you as a producer, essentially, for releasing your work. It does allow for people to share the files. Like if you were listening to Colorado Sequence and you wanted to send it to 20 friends or something, you could do that without infringement. Actually, handing around books, which people do all the time, I suppose is a form of copyright infringement in a way.
Could they steal your story and use it for their own book or their movie or whatever?
They can. That's what the Creative Commons license is.
Okay, so it covers that. Okay.
I've never heard of a Creative Commons license before. How do you get one?
It's done automatically whenever you publish a book through Podiobooks. That's what someone listening to this has to agree to, if you will. Sort of the same way whenever you open up a book and it says copyright 2008, you can't take that book and then sell it for profit, essentially, or reproduce the copy or make images of it or something without the consent of the author. Yes.
Now, are the listeners actually downloading the podcast file, or they're only getting a stream?
They can do it a number of different ways. You can just download it straight to your computer so that you have an MP3 file on your computer that could play through, say, a Windows media player or or in iTunes.
So that would be the way they could legally copy that file and email it to 10 of their friends.
Yes. And there's a link to that. You know, you could link to your page here. It's a pretty simple URL. People could link to it if they really like it or something.
But you mentioned a feed, RSS feed. That would be a different thing.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The RSS feed, the way that works, and again, I'm not totally an expert on this, but the way that works, like my wife has a Google Mail account, and she has RSS feeds to about, let's say about 10 different blogs. So whenever somebody writes a new blog, it sends a notification to her Gmail account that that blog has a new posting. If you were to subscribe to the RSS feed for a book through Podiobooks, it would do the same thing, so that when you go to open up your email, it would say, you know, a new episode has been uploaded, and then you can click on the link and listen to it. If you're a regular iTunes user and are into iPods and all that kind of stuff, it'll automatically send the new episode to your iTunes folder for this particular book. So,
So you don't miss one.
And do you pay iTunes for it, or do you just, your subscription pays for getting the book?
iTunes is free on Macs. It's a free software.
Oh, it's free, that's right, okay. But iTunes doesn't get any money for,
No.
nothing, okay.
And there are other online, I'm really getting into the whole online audio book world, if you will. Like Audible is another website you might check out, audible.com.
Oh, yeah, okay, that before.
They do charge money.
Yeah.
But you know, like Michael Crichton will have his latest book, you know, available through Audible, where somebody can pay $40 or whatever and listen to it for best-selling authors. They may have a way for self-published authors as well to use that. I haven't explored it a lot yet, but yes.
If you're like a first-time audiobook publisher, like how do you get people to know that your work is online?
That's a great question.
Flyers?
Did everybody get a flyer?
So you have to do your own marketing.
You really do. Now, Podiobooks, the guys who are running it, Evo Terra is the main guy behind it. His name is EVO, and I've met him a couple of times. They're totally immersed in this world of podcasting and digital media, and they're really savvy about this stuff. What they've done is they've built this website in such a way that you could release your feed through Delicious. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Podcast Pickle, Podcast Alley. There's like 40 different places where you could very easily get your Podiobook listed into their database once you publish your book. For example,
Once you publish on Podio?
right, on Podiobooks. I mean, here, I don't know exactly how this works, but if you click on bookmark here, it brings up the social marker website, and you can release your book through all of these. There's dig.com, Delicious, Twitter, faves.com, dingo.com, all these social networking sites, essentially.
Did you use that?
I did. I used about 5 of the more popular ones, and I had to actually defer to my wife on this stuff because this is not really stuff that I was terribly familiar with. But I was like, well, which of these should I use? And she said, if you use this one, this one, this one, and that one, it'll end up in all of these others.
And do they charge?
No.
Okay.
At least the ones that I use didn't charge.
Does Podiobooks charge you a fee to post?
No. No, it's completely free.
Why?
How did you bring those up?
Why?
Those social networks?
There's a little link on my Audiobook
Yeah,
page.
you have a blog?
Yeah, I don't have a blog, yeah.
So,
Within the list on the Podiobooks, and it's saying, you know, like young adult, erotica, whatever, can you go there and then get a cataloging of books that tell you a little bit about it before you decide to?
sure. Let's just do, let's do one, for example. Back to the home page here. And again, one thing that I'd like to emphasize, again, I don't know if I've emphasized this before, is because this is so new, they've been around about 3 years, there's only about 200 titles on here. which creates an interesting scenario where you're not having to compete with 10,000 other people. So just keep that in mind. In terms of reaching an audience, they have a pretty strong audience. Let's click on, let's say, science fiction, for example. Their audience tends to be, Podiobooks tends to be more science fiction based, but they, like I say, they publish all these different types of books. So we've got science fiction. We'll click go. Oh, this one is, this guy here has done extremely well. This J.C. Hutchins. We'll click on his first book here. And his description reads, 3 weeks ago, the U.S. president was murdered by a 4-year-old boy. Today, 7 men stare at each other in a locked conference room. So it gives a description of the book.
That sounds interesting.
Listen to like the first 60 seconds of it and see somebody else's quality and everything.
The following is a Podiobooks.com presentation. Seventh Son, Book 1, Descent. A podcast novel written by J.C. Hutchins. Read by the author. For more information about this novel, please visit www.jchutchins.net.
And this fella claims to have had like 3 million downloads of his book.
From here?
Once he released it on Podiobooks.
3 million from Podiobooks?
Yeah, this
They got
guy
a band with streaming.
at least he says. I don't know. I don't have anything to base that on
United
other than his
States
own word.
is dead.
What's his
He
name?
was murdered in the morning sunlight
J.C.
by a
Hutchins.
4-year-old boy. It had been a simple stumping rally in Kentucky, no more than a pit stop on Tobacco Road. The Bluegrass State would vote Republican in next year's election, just as it had in 2000 and 2004. At least that's what President Hank Gator Griffin had said on this crisp October
So
morning.
there you go. I mean, it's just to give you an idea of how it goes. So a lot of the authors use that same sort of format where they do, you know, a 30-second to 60-second intro, a little bit of music background, and then you can read your own book, or you could, if you can find an actor or friend to do the reading. It's a big help. It takes a lot of time to do these things, hence the $150, 5,000 word. Yes, sir.
You can't use music without permission, right?
You would need to use either stock music from, say, you know, from iMovie or something that's, you know, given to an audience, or you could use music that is produced through a Creative Commons license again.
Because you're using it for background, not for your own use, I mean, to make money.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you know.
But you definitely wouldn't want to use, you know, like, you know, Creedence Clearwater Revival's CD and then download the song from it and use it in the background.
No.
I mean, you could do that, but you might get some lawyer emailing you in the future.
That music's 40 years old though, isn't that part of the public domain now?
There you go.
Yeah.
So maybe so. But yeah, you would want to use, you'd want to be careful to use background music that's either stock music or that is readily available to the public, either through the fact that it's, you know, in the public domain or something like that.
Stacey, what are your thoughts about having more than one person read on a book, like a male and a female? Can you do that? I mean, to bring some pop to it?
That's a great question. A good friend of mine who I did a panel with on Podiobooks up in Raleigh a few weeks ago, PG Holyfield, is doing a full-scale theatrical production with like 10 different people involved in it. I could bring up his, and you can do that. But you can do that. It's just, it gets harder and harder to produce it. If you've got 10 different people that you're having to pull files from and navigate. It's what I found with the Colorado sequence. One actor who's really motivated to do it, who's very good with his diction and reading, is the simplest way to go. It's kind of lean and mean. It gets the book up there. The readers are enjoying it, and that seems to work.
I have a question about editing. So how do you get a proof from that? You get an iTunes or something along those lines that you can listen to and say, well, okay, I like parts of it, or I want this changed, or but then the music, where you added in the music, so on. That obviously comes after the final read-through. But how can you have some sort of hands-on control over it once you give it to somebody to read?
Well, what I do with the actor that I work with is he just does the reading, and then I do all of the post-production work, essentially. In fact, I think I have just his reading of the most recent chapter here, chapter 7. And this is in a WAV file. You remember, I mentioned a while ago, it's a little bit more complicated for me because I'm using somebody else's work and then pulling it into Audacity. But here's his
Chapter 7.
His raw reading without any music or
line.
anything.
Dr. Amy Levine stood 20 feet from the Arcade 81 in a green medical uniform with the surgical mask covering his face.
So this is just, just the reading itself. What I do is thanks for the honest feedback there. I would take this and upload it into Audacity, add some music to the background, like I had kind of showed you a little bit with Audacity. And then from Audacity, what I do is a little bit more complicated. I then create a WAV file on here, then take it over to the PC. I have a PC at home. And there I create the MP3, and I'm able to do something called tagging it, which is where you put all the labels on it and the artist name and all that stuff. All the specifics like that are listed on the Podiobooks site. They have a PDF file that has their how-to instructions from beginning to end, and it will take some time to read that to get the logistics of the specifications of the type of files that they want, the type of rate that the audio has to be, all these kinds of things. Hence why it's a particular skill set. Like I said, I think anybody can do this, but if you just wanted to pay somebody to do it, I'm beginning to entertain the idea of doing full productions with an actor, music, getting it up on Podiobooks.com and everything for about $150 per 5,000 words. So, yes, Tim?
Well, like I said, little questions keep popping in my head. Back to the contacting them and the editing and, like you said, adding into the sound effects and so on down the line. In proofing the work, if you say, no, I don't like the way this is going, you can back it out and say, no, I want you to reread this or something like that. But I guess I forgot with the actual.
But with the music, you're saying, can I?
Yeah, music, and that's what.
But I'm doing. But I don't know if it's clear. I'm doing all the post production.
Right,
work.
that's what I'm getting at. Is you're doing all the post production, but we being not quite so computer savvy is what I'm wondering is how we could set up our own thing. By you said you can do it through your programming if you have that kind of hardware to be able to do that or software. I don't know because. My situation is a little different because of being a storyteller. Most of my stuff is not scripted, it's not written down. So could I take like a digital recorder and then, like when I go do a live performance or something like that, I can record it and then it's my voice and then run it through the same kind of system?
Absolutely.
Opposed to having somebody sit there and read it?
Yes.
So that would be the one skill I would like to do.
I think you might do some of the sound resolution unless you match the file formats carefully.
Yeah, see, like I said, I'm just trying to figure out how to match it all up, that it would work. And see, and I also have that program Dragon Speaks. I think we talked about that before. I've never been able to fine tune it to be able to make it work. But what I was thinking is if I could take it and put it on a DVD or put it on some sort of recording, and then let the recording play into the computer, and then let Dragon Speaks pick it up, and then the text could come out of it after that.
It's not going to happen.
Too much, asking too much.
Yeah, that's asking a lot.
Well, I've never been able to fine-tune the thing to be able to make it work. So.
You might get most of it, but you'd have to edit it.
I do have a sign-in sheet. If you would, be sure to put your name and email address, and that way I can let you know about future events. We're planning to have a panel discussion. We'll return to the panel format for next month. Are there other questions?
Yeah, one quick one. Is this something that Amazon would ever get interested in if you had a marketable podcast? You know, something that turned out decent. Is that anything Amazon gets involved with yet? I mean, in the dollars and cents.
You might look at createspace.com, which is actually an Amazon imprint, and they have these things called an unbox, which is basically an audio download that you would pay, that reader would pay or listener would pay money for, and you could basically do what Podiobooks is doing, but charge money on your own through createspace.com. So they're beginning to tap into the market for this. Jackie?
I was a little rushed today, so I was on my computer upstairs, which has no air conditioning since it's in the attic. And then I ran down to use my husband's computer, and I did not remember audiobooks. I remembered podcasts, so that's what I put in, and then put in your name, and it came up. So did it link to this, or did podcasts have?
So you found the page that I've been showing here.
So podcast linked to that.
I guess so. Yeah. So you did like a Google search or
I
something?
just did podcast, and then it came up, and I just did podcast. It didn't go to Podiobooks.
Well, what that's. So where was it? Where was it? Where was the feed
I
coming
thought it
from?
was podcast.com, I think. That's what I put in.
Could be. And again, like I say, once you get this stuff out there onto the internet, then it gets disseminated to a lot of these other sites. And so somebody doing a Google search for, you know, Jacqueline DeGroot podcast, then they find a link to it maybe on Podcast Alley or Podcast Pickle or
It's viral.
podcast.com.
Yeah. Well, I noticed it had 88 weeks. And it had something like had 88 weeks and months. And it was like the last time it had been revived, or the last time it had been something. So it's been in there for 88 weeks?
No, not,
So
not, well, I've done I should have mentioned this early on. I did a Podiobook of the Amber Page book about 3 years ago.
That's the one I got.
That's one that I did several years ago, and I used the exact same service. At that time, Podiobooks only had about 10 titles, and I tend to be sort of conservative before moving into business ventures, and I was like, well, are these guys going to even stick around for a year or what have you? And I did the Amber Page book. I had never used Audacity before. It was very much a learning experience, but it did get that book out there. It ended up, I think I've got about 700 active subscribers to the Amber Page book, and that was one that I just it was sort of an experiment. I sort of just tossed it out there to see what would happen. And it's still online, yeah.
Can you link from your Stacey's website to the Podiobook? Do they allow you to do that?
Oh, yeah.
No problem.
In fact, there's a link on the Stacey Cochran site, which I put in like big font that says, listen to an audiobook reading with actor Owen Daly or something.
Okay.
Like
And
that.
did they give you the link image for that, or can you just use anything you want?
I just used HTML text through the website, the way that I actually do my StaceyCochran.com website.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Anything else, Tim?
Yeah, I guess I'm just not quite as techy as everybody else, but I'm wondering about people taking it. Once you said that there's so many sources that can get a hold of it once you put it on there. So what would keep somebody from taking that? I know you have the copyright, but could they manipulate it somehow and take it and put it into another format and use it as part of a book or something?
Well, legally they can't, using the Creative Commons license.
Right.
Legally they can't. So if they did that, if somebody did that, or if you were flipping through the channels on a TV one night and you heard your voice, you know, on the Disney Channel.
Yeah, that happens every now and then.
And then what you could do is, you know, you could contact an attorney and say, hey, I put this podcast novel out there and it's published through a Creative Commons license and I heard it on the Disney Channel the other night without my permission. Then you've got the legal rights on your side through a Creative Commons license.
Okay, well, like I said, I understand about copyrights, but how do you keep that from happening without actually being your own watchdog out there doing it?
can't.
With the copyright
Only a
laws?
digital watermark. If you can find a way to do a digital watermark on the MP3, that can help you. I don't know if there's a way to do that very cheaply.
Yeah, I don't know how you would police it on your own. And like I say, I've had nearly 5,000 downloads of the book in just a month or a couple of months. Any one of those 5,000 could, I guess, be doing something illegal with the book. Keep in mind, though, this was a book that I self-published anyways.
Right.
And I put it on Podiobooks in a not-for-profit way. And people aren't paying money for this on Podiobooks, so anybody can download it. I think it's so what's the pros and cons, if you will, of using a Podiobook? The negative of using it is there's no money in it right now, directly as a result of putting a book online. unless people start donating to your book. Which I want to remind everybody once again, I do have a tip jar. If you'd like to leave $1 or $5.
I guess my question, other than advertising, then why would you put it out there where everybody can get a hold of it?
That's a good question. So the positive of it is it creates a whole other readership for your book. Now, this is not a paying readership, though.
Unless they decide that they like what they read and want to buy your book.
Yes, and then a few people might buy the book. Or if it really takes off, let's say you're able to get on, some national media outlets via your podcast novel, and suddenly you've got 10,000 subscribers, then you're going to probably sell some books as a result of that. So again, the positives are you're able to reach a very broad audience. You're able to reach an audience that you wouldn't be reaching otherwise. This is truly international. I mean, somebody in France could listen to this. Somebody in India could listen to this. Anybody with an internet connection could listen to your book. That's the positive. It opens up a potential audience. Another positive, which I can't overemphasize enough, is I think these online audiobooks are really hot now. I think it's something that people are downloading into their iPods, they're listening to on their commute and work. It's a whole new medium in terms of a format. And so it's people are interested in it. It's kind of it's a novel format in and of itself. The negative is right now, the folks at Podiobooks aren't forcing people to pay for these books. Now, a company like Audible.com, which I mentioned earlier, does, and they're published similar to traditional audiobooks. So you might check out Audible.com if you're more interested in putting your book out there for $20 or whatever.
What makes them want to buy your book, though? You don't give them the full meal deal. You only give them just enough to get them interested, right? You wouldn't actually, like you said, you were doing an ongoing series. So until the moment that the actual final chapter has been put on podcast, you're still baiting people to buy the book, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the way that I look at it, again, I can't emphasize this enough, is as a marketing tool,
It's a free
not
publicity.
a money-making tool. Right. It's a way to spread the word about it.
Well, it's the same thing as music CDs. I mean, I listen to music on the radio. So you could say, well, you're just giving away your music. Sure, I can record it. In fact, I do it all the time. And I don't go out and buy the CD. And yet, the more it gets around on the radio, the more CD sales increase. There's that relationship.
That's an excellent example. Yeah.
But bands, like when they send out a demo, they don't give if it's say a 7-minute song, they'll only put like 1.5 minutes of that 7-minute song.
I don't know enough about how the radio business works, but I bet these music publishers like Sony Music, I bet they send CDs out to the radio stations at no charge to the stations.
Right, but like I said, they only send a partial of the song, so they hear it just enough to get get your toe tapping and get you really into it, and then they say, okay, and now if you want to buy the
I guess what you could do, if you wanted to really kind of bait people, is do half your book and then say, okay, for the rest of the book, you've got to go buy it.
Right.
I don't know.
Your house and read it.
Or
and when you buy it, you get a CD of the rest of it if you want to listen to it.
Or if you're like me, I write about a novel per year, so I'm cranking out a lot of work. I know, Jackie, you write that at that rate
You're
too.
promoting yourself.
If you're doing a lot of work, and you've got a couple of books that weren't able to find a Random House or Time Warner publisher, and you self-publish it through Lulu or iUniverse or Alta House or Lightning Source or whatever, then this is a marketing tool. And if you're putting out a book per year and people begin to associate your name with action, suspense, thrillers, then they're going to be excited when the next book comes out. That's exactly what this guy Scott Sigler did. His first book did very well, but then people began to associate his name, his brand, if you will, with this particular style of book. He did like 5 books through Podiobooks, which is, he wasn't making any money at all, unless people were giving him donations for that, before he had built a large enough readership, or listenership, if you will, that then a publisher took a chance on him, Crown, and published, what is it, Infected, I think, earlier this year. And the thing ended up becoming, a best-selling novel, and is still selling like hotcakes, because he had built that readership in place. You might equate this to some degree in publishing to publishing short stories where you get contributors' copies or, $20 or something nominal like that. It's a way to get your work out to people that wouldn't be aware of it otherwise. it's really, I think it's neat because it's so brand new. It's only been around a few years, and it's catching on. Is the thing. So, but you know, use your own discretion. If you don't want to give
No,
it
I'm
away
not
for
saying
free,
it's not a good thing. I'm just a little bit of a skeptic. I just want to hear all the sides of it, so that way, when I do get into it, I know kind of what I'm setting myself up for. You know?
And it's a ton of work, quite honestly. If, for example, the actor who's doing the narration for the book, he sent me some figures yesterday because we were talking about, well, I'll mention to people that I can do these full productions. What should we set the price at? And he said basically for about a 7-hour production that ends up in 7 hours of recorded time. The final product of 7 hours of recorded time, it takes him about 30 hours of work to do. You know, that's a lot of time one-on-one with the computer and a microphone reading your work. It's a lot of work. So maybe the investment is not worth it, you know. For me, with the Colorado sequence, it's injected new life into this book. No, I'm not making much money at it, but this is one venture, and I've got an actor friend doing the narration, so it's easing the workload, if you will.
When Stephen King wrote The Green Mile, I believe, I don't know whether it was an audio or text, but he did the first chapters for donations and charged for the last chapter.
There you go, and he's known for his marketing savvy, too. So.
So that's what I was thinking, is give them just enough to get them interested.
A teaser.
Yeah, a teaser, like a trailer for a movie. You know, like when you go to the movie theater and you see, you know, coming in June or coming whenever, and they shoot like take a movie, which would be a 3-hour movie, and condense it down to like 7 minutes. So all you get is the action. You know.
Well, and that makes me think of what this gentleman here asked a minute ago. You know, about putting it on your own website. There certainly are programs that you can use to, not other than Podiobooks, where you could do like a 7-minute, you know, section of your book, put it on your website, and then people get a sample of it, and you don't have to invest doing the whole book online. Right. For somebody like you, who's a professional storyteller, and you're constantly finding new places to perform, that might be an excellent sort of online business card, if you will. If you had the first 5 minutes of a performance that you did, you could send it to, you know, somebody at a festival who's in charge of programming and say, hey, this is me at the Georgetown Festival, you know, doing my performance. And then they could listen to it and say, oh, this guy's really good, and use that as sort of an online business card.
Well, a long time ago, I had cassette tapes to kind of give you how long I've been doing this. And every school that I performed at, I would give them a cassette tape, you know, that they would put in their library that kids could go and listen to at any point in time they wanted to. Because I'd already gotten their money because I'd worked for a week at that school. But then at the end of the week, I'd say, oh, by the way, if your mom and dad are interested in these cassettes, I've got them. But there was one of them in the library that belongs to the school. And so I always, somebody said, you know, give them away. Give them away to every school you go to. Well, when I originally got them, I had 500 of them. Well, boom, 500 of them are gone, and I never reprinted, you know, never re-recorded it. So, I mean, I probably have one cassette tape hidden in a drawer somewhere that I never gave away. But they were really good selling tools. But now, like I said, you know, everything's so much more high-tech than cassette tapes. So,
but it's basically the same thing.
Same
With
idea.
iTunes, if you're using iTunes, you can burn CDs of your reading. So, for example, I could take the MP3 file, put it into iTunes, or just use the podcast feed, put it up in iTunes, pop in a CD in the front of this thing, click burn, it'll burn the CD of it, then I could then put in my CD player. And if you wanted to do a whole book, yeah, you could catalog and have like 7 CDs and then sell it, you know, for $50 or whatever is a fair price.
Package set.
Stacey, with Podiobooks, are you obligated to give them the whole kit and caboodle on a book, or can you start it and, you know, do your episodes, but, you know, stop at any time, you know, where maybe you say for the other chapters, contact us, blah, 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 or do they want you to have the whole package?
With Podiobooks, that's a good question. I mean, you don't, they intend for you to put the whole book online. They don't want users frustrating their audience, essentially. For example, when I did the Amber Page book when I was first starting out, we had a major move. I had to move from Arizona back home to North Carolina in the middle of that, and I just had to step away from it for several months. I think they actually disabled it for that time. I communicated with them that, hey, I'm just not going to be able to do anything for like 6 months on this. And so they disabled it during that time. Once I got settled in North Carolina and had everything kind of back into normalcy, then I restarted it and they put it back online. So the expectation is that you'll deliver the whole book. So yeah, I can't emphasize that enough as well. Don't go into it with the mentality of, I'm just going to put 3 chapters up there. If you want to do that, you can do that using your own website or something. There might be competitors to Podiobooks right now where you could do sample stuff. There's a short story publication online which is called Pseudopod, and they actually buy for like $50 short stories that are read. So it's like a literary magazine or a science fiction magazine, but in audiobook format. So there are some places where you can, similar to what Podiobooks is doing, but slightly different. Well, we've been going about an hour. Does anybody else have any other questions about Podiobooks?
I just want to say this is all new to me, and I never heard of this before, and I'm finding it very interesting.
Well, thank you. That was my intent.
That might be a good
Yeah.
Maybe one more question.
Years ago, I used to supply.
I was going to say, you aren't always just going to get the typical person who would pick up a book and then decide they want it on podcast. There are a lot of women now that don't have time with children and things that are going on in their life to actually pick up a book and read it. But they are walking, and they are in their car, and the iPod fits right into an adapter. So you will get a different readership from this than just the typical person who's going into a bookstore to get a book. So you will enlarge your networking, which is a big thing, is to get them in there.
It's a good alternate way for us struggling writer to get his work published.
Yeah, it's a neat alternative, and it's a totally new format. By the time I'm done with the Colorado sequence, I'll probably be somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 subscribers. We may have as many as like 30,000 downloads by that point. If you compare that to American Idol contestants whenever they release their singles, I was looking at the statistics, and Michael Johns, who was one of these American Idol finalists, released a single that had like 8,000 downloads. Of course, now that's paying downloads, so it's a little bit different. But 8,000 compared to 30,000, so it's in the same ballpark. So it opens up a whole new audience for your book, which I think is really fascinating.
Does Podiobooks charge their subscribers to subscribe to the thing in the first place, or is it free?
It's all donation. What I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know, I think Evo, I know his mentality a little bit, the guy behind the website, he'll probably keep it free. If they were really, really savvy, what they do is they build up their title list. I don't know, it's kind of a competing strategy, and then start charging fees or phase in fees for some of the best-selling authors and have them charge money. But because it's such a new venture, entrepreneurial venture, I think at first they were very clear about wanting to make everything free, so that they would build this 50,000 membership that they have.
Have they got to the point where they have pop-up ads, books and stuff? Or
It's not that bad. They have like little Google ads at the top of the page, but nothing that, to me anyway, nothing that's obnoxious. Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. If you have any questions, feel free to hang out and have some questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is the way. This is where it's going to be. It's just like the newspapers. If you think about it, how many people
Go to the website, you'll get instructions on how to get it. You can work on there, be on there. Okay. Great. Thanks a lot. My name's Jonathan, by the way. You're welcome. This is my first time at the
Oh, yeah?
My friend over here, Laura Lang, recommended it. You're welcome. Yeah, it's from what?
I've always
I was online this morning, I was checking my emails and stuff. Well, it's too late to call about
Which times I can't come. You always learn something.
Are you in the process of writing a
I am getting a little.
You always learn something. Which I'm sure.
I heard your voice back there.
Put your name in it.
Haven't you been?
You will automatically
What I'm writing is a fictional book. It's fictional about a government workplace and touching on what happens to people backstab, so forth in the workplace.
I've read a lot of the self-publishing. Money's always a factor.
You know, Gary, I was going to say, I
I'd like to help. I had Miller who helped me. I use his illustrations and then he does my covers. He's going to, so he's already done one printed. And I hope it was good. I like to write visually, but I just use it. Takes me lunch. He won't let me ever
corrections. You don't get intimidated.
Not this coming week. Next week.
I was sure some of these famous authors that they saw that.
Is that your wife?
No.
Everybody's got a...
Oh, yes. So anyway, it's he had but that would be great. Now, if you do a literary agent, it's just writing the letter to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they want, you can sell those books every day. Sometimes some of the people don't even market, so they go just by that thing, and that's very, very intimidating, because I don't know if I can
What it did was, for some reason, it got into my address.
Nice to meet you.
Last now, all this stuff, you know, even military. I used to know that.